All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here on this Saturday morning. We are going to go ahead and get started. And just a heads up to everybody, we are recording, but none of your names or faces will show up on the recording, so just be aware of that. Okay. So hello, we are Next Level Up Counseling Services. We are a private practice here in DC. We work with children and families and their caregivers. We do parent consultations for clients in DC and also in Maryland. So you'll see the three of us up on the screen and also here today. So I am right there in the middle. My name is Dina Gerges. I am a licensed clinical social worker, again, working in DC and Maryland. And my two colleagues are Juana Marquez Villegas. She is a licensed professional counselor, and Leticia Manuel, also a clinical social worker. And all of us work with clients in DC and Maryland. So if you are at any point interested in learning more, you can go visit us on our website at nextlevelupcounseling.com. All of our information, our individual bios, there's information about us as a practice, and then what services we offer are available there. You can also, if you're interested, follow us on Instagram, where we put little tips and tricks and just mental health, child-related things up on there as well. So again, we are Next Level Up Counseling Services, and we are here today to provide this workshop series that is on how to support children at each stage of life. So this is a three-part series. The part one was last week that Juana led, and that was on early childhood. So that's children ages 3 to 5. And it was a great talk. So if you missed that, if you were there, welcome back. And if you missed that, then you can catch the video recording. We have put it up on our website. That's nextlevelupcounseling.com. So you can go and review that. And today you are here for part two, which is middle childhood, children ages 6 to 11. And this also happens to be my favorite stage of life to work with and to just be around. This is a really fun and curious stage of life for children. It might not always seem fun, especially as a parent, but hopefully today we're going to go through some things that you can do as a parent or a caregiver, things that you can do to support children to really make sure that they're growing and developing in a way that is healthy and really preparing them for that next stage of life. So we'll get right into it. Oops. All right, so very quick, our agenda for today, we are going to briefly talk about Erikson's stage of psychosocial development, which is just sort of a fancy thing. We'll talk about it. And then we're going to talk about who these kids are. So we're going to really contextualize who are these children, what are some characteristics and qualities that we see in children at this stage. And then the reason that you're all here, what is it that they need? In light of who they are, what is it that they need? And how can we be people who provide for them what they need so they can really grow and thrive and get the most out of this stage of life? All right. So before we get into the information, I just kind of wanted to pose a question for you all, something that I think is really important to kind of reflect on, is that what is something that you needed from your parent when you were at this stage? So sometimes as parents and caregivers, it's really hard. We have our own agendas, we have our own priorities, and it can be really hard to kind of put ourselves in the position of the child, right? So we have things to do, we have places to be, we have deadlines, we got to get going and moving. And sometimes we can put a lot of demands on our children. And it's important, I think, and helpful to take a minute to think about, well, when you were a child at this age, what is something that you might have needed from your parent? And maybe that's something that you feel like you got from your parent. And maybe it's something that you feel like you never got from your parent. And so think about what that effect had on you, and think about if you could kind of put yourself in the position of your child now. Or maybe, your child isn't at this stage quite yet, but kind of think forward. What is something that you needed? And have that kind of be in the background as you're thinking about planning for how you're going to handle things, planning on what it is that you are going to do and show up, and how you're going to talk to your child. What is it that you might have needed, and what might your child also need from you at this stage? All right, so Erikson's stages of psychosocial development. So Erik Erikson is a psychologist who was pretty prominent back in the 50s and early 60s or so. And one of his most famous contributions to the world of psychology is this idea that each stage of life comes with a marker of psychosocial development. So each stage of life essentially has this psychological crisis, something that a child is going to wrestle with and deal with, right? And then where they fall on that scale is going to determine how ready and how healthy they are going into the next stage of life. So as you can see, this, I really like this chart because they're all in beautiful little colors. And we're going to focus right there on that green one. So as you can see, there's a picture of a pencil and an apple because this stage of childhood, what we call middle childhood, they're calling school age. And that's really what it is it's school is the most important factor, the most defining factor of this stage of life for children. They are entering compulsory schools. So maybe you have a child who went to pre-K or went to daycare. But now at this stage of life, they are mandated to go to school. So they're going to be with all children who all have to go to school, and for full long days, especially in DC, school days are a full 8 hours. And so that really plays into their development. And so what they're wrestling with, what Erikson called, is something called industry versus inferiority. And he uses these words that don't kind of naturally make sense. So we're going to go into what that means. But I just wanted to show you in light of the life cycle, we are right there. Industry versus inferiority. That is the wrestle and the struggle for children at this age. So we'll talk about what that means in the next slide. So industry. Industry is the child who is able to develop a sense of competency. They feel capable. They feel that they have skills. They are able to use them. They feel able. They are able to push through. These are children who feel like they have a place in the world and that they matter. They can do. Okay? And the other side of that is inferiority. These are children that go through the stage and conclude that they are not able to do things. They have a lack of confidence. They feel like they're not good enough. They feel like they don't really have a place. Okay. So these are the two sides of the scale. And this entire stage of life is they are working towards figuring out which side of the scale they're going to lean on. Right. So our role as adults is to support these children in figuring out which side of the scale they lean on. And of course, right, as parents and as caregivers and people who love and want to support these children, we want to provide opportunities and to use language and to support these children into falling on that side of industry. We want them to graduate the stage of life and go into that next adolescent period of life feeling capable, feeling confident, feeling able, right? Because that prepares them to deal with the challenges that come in adolescence, which is a whole other ball game that we'll talk about next Saturday if you're coming to that workshop. But so we are helping these children with this wrestle. And the major question of the stage, what they're asking themselves is, what is good and what is bad? And more specifically, they're asking themselves, well, how am I good or how am I bad? So either they're thinking, how am I good at something? How am I bad at something? And then if I am good at something or if I am bad at something, they're also figuring out, does that make me a good kid? Does that make me a bad kid? Right? And so this is really important because this is where our language and our role as adults is really important, because we can help children make the conclusions. They're asking themselves, if I had a bad day, if I made a mistake, if I, did something that I shouldn't have done, they are going to ask themselves, well, does that make me good? Does that make me bad? And so if we're upset and we're angry and we're talking to our children, we say, why did you hit your brother? Or that was so bad, and we're getting angry, then they are internalizing, okay, well, I did this, so I must be bad. Versus talking to our children about, hey, you had a bad day. Hey, that was a bad choice. That wasn't a good moment, right? Talking to them about that, but that doesn't make you a bad kid. Hey, we're going to fix it. How do we fix it? How do we move on, right? You're not a bad kid. You're a good kid who just had a bad moment, made a bad choice, had a bad day, okay? And that's okay, because that still leaves room for, okay, I can recover. I can still feel competent and capable and in control of being able to change things for the better. So this is the major thing that they are wrestling with and struggling with, and we are such a critical part in their lives as the adults who are there, who care for them, and helping them navigate and figuring out where they're going to end and leave this stage of life on which side of that? That industry side, where they're feeling good and able, or that inferiority side, where they are feeling really unable and incapable. Okay, so this is just kind of the higher level of this is their psychosocial challenge, right? So everything that we do helps them in being able to master this, all right? So who are these kids, right? These are just some characteristics and qualities of children at this stage. And we're going to go into them a little bit more in the next section. So I just kind of want to read them. But generally what I want to say is that these are things that kids are really going through. They are changing, they are transitioning, they are doing hard things they've never done before, they are scared, they're concrete, they are social. And I don't mean that in terms of personality. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. They're curious, okay? They're aware, they're constantly looking around, they're asking questions and they're figuring out what sources they can get those answers from. They're obsessed with justice. They're obsessed with fairness. You know, this is the tattletale stage. So if you have a child in this stage, you are probably saying yes, okay? They're going to tell you everything that is fair. They're going to tell you he did something wrong. They're going to tell you she got 2 Oreos and you only got 1. Okay, they are concrete. They are the police of this is the police age, okay? They're going to constantly want to be telling you what's going on. Sometimes we feel like they won't stop asking questions, and that all of that is just a part of their development, right? This is just who they are. And knowing that, I think, allows us to have a little bit of levity about it. Okay, this is just the stage of life that you're in. And we're going to talk about things in light of who they are, things that we can do to help support them in each of these qualities. And I put that little picture up there because I think that that's just a pretty good representation of what it can mean when a child is navigating all these transitions, all these changes, all these new responsibilities, and it can kind of feel to them like their mind is blah, and we are here to try to help them take that blah and make some sense of it. All right, so we're going to go into each of these and what they need. So the first one, what do they need as concrete thinkers? So concrete thinkers means that children at this stage are not yet able to dwell in abstract thought, okay? They can't live in a world of like gray and nuance, all right, and like poetic language. They're very much about the black and white, the right and wrong, the good and bad, the here and now, okay? It's really complicated for these children to think about, oh, maybe next week we can do this. They're really worried about, well, what's going to happen now? And what can I get now? They're not very flexible yet in their thinking. Now, this changes when you're in the later half of this stage, because hopefully by that point they've worked on these skills, they're learning, they're building flexibility, right? Because then they go into the adolescent years and it's a lot more flexible, a lot more abstract, okay? But here at the beginning, okay, especially if your child is in that 6 and 7 early ages of this stage, they're just really concrete. And so what they need from us is they need concrete responses, right? Sometimes as parents, we can get really caught up in things that we know and understand. And so we talk about things in a way that is really hard for them to grasp. And so sometimes we talk about things in a way when we've already lost a child, right? And so what they need, if I need someone to do something, then I need to make sure that I'm clear and I'm simple and I'm telling them what it is exactly that I need from them. So for example, if your child's room is a mess, all right, and I say, you're always doing this, your room is a mess, I need you to go clean it up. Okay, that's not very concrete. You're thinking, I told them to clean their room. They're thinking, well, what does that mean? How clean is clean enough? What level of cleanliness will satisfy? Where does everything go? If I just throw everything under my bed, well, it looks clean. Is that clean? What is it that I need from you as a parent? I need to be able to communicate that clearly, right? So instead, if you say, your room is really messy, I need you to put your books on the bookshelf, I need you to put the stuffies on the bed. It's a very different conversation. It's concrete, it's tangible. Now I know, okay, I need to put the books on the bookshelf, the stuffies on the bed. I've done the 2 things that I'm asked of. That meets the level of expectation of what a clean room looks like, right? It's something they can hold on to. It's something that allows them to then plan their actions after. Now, They can still choose not to follow those directions, and that's a different conversation, all right? But in terms of you relaying to them what your expectation is in a way that's concrete that they can hold on to and understand, simple, clear, I need you to do this and I need you to do that. Okay, now I know I'm being asked to do this, I'm being asked to do that, all right? This is also a really good opportunity to teach children to use concrete language too, right? So we can teach them to say very concretely in a tangible way that makes sense what it is that they want and need from others. So I don't like to play with you when you hit me. All right, that tells another person, when I hit you, you don't want to play with me. That's clear, that's tangible. So then they know if I want to play with you, I can't hit you, right? Now, again, there's always space for children to not follow those directions, to cross that boundary. That's a later conversation. But in terms of being able to tell them, hey, if you want something from someone, you want to set a boundary, set an expectation, be concrete, be clear. You teach them that and you model that with how you also set those expectations for them. Okay? It's also really important because they're concrete thinkers to talk about consistency and logic in the consequences that we have. So for example, if my expectation is that you clean your room and you don't clean your room, okay, then what is the consequence of not cleaning your room? And how am I clearly explaining to the child what that consequence is? And am I being consistent in that? So this is a challenge because sometimes parents come home and they're tired and they might have said that there's a consequence and then they get tired and they forget and then there isn't actually a consequence. Or sometimes something is okay and then next time all of a sudden it's not okay. And that becomes really confusing for children because then they can't predict what's next. And that can create a feeling of unsafety for a child. I don't know what's next. I can't figure out, I can't plan. So therefore I feel like there's actually no control. So it's really important for parents. It's a conversation I have a lot with parents about consistency. It's key. It not only helps children feel safe and know what is expected of them, it helps them build up the skill of planning what they can then do. I can expect what's going to happen. I am then in control. I can take ownership of my behavior because if I don't do something and I get a consequence, well, I know that that is a result of me not doing something, right? It's a way that they are learning and growing. That consistency is so key. And this is specifically important in two-parent households because sometimes what we see a lot is one parent is on one page and one parent's on another page, and that's also very confusing for a child. We have one parent that they know they're always going to get away with stuff from, and one parent who's really strict, well, then they're going to change their behavior based on who is around them. And that's going to create tension in the household. That's going to create inconsistency, and it's not helpful for the child. Both parents really need to be on the same page. And if you say there's going to be a consequence, then you need to follow through with that consequence. And not everything is fair, and kids want to understand why. And this becomes really prevalent with students in school, but a really good example is when they're older siblings. So if they are an older sibling, they're not going to understand necessarily why their 3-year-old sibling isn't going to get something or is going to be treated differently than they are as a 6-year-old. That's going to feel not good. That they're obsessed with fairness. They're obsessed with justice at this age. So why is it that my little sibling gets away with something when I am being held to a different standard? And so very concrete, very simply, very clearly, you can help explain this to them. Your little sister doesn't know how to do the things that you know how to do. So she needs a little bit more help from mom in order to learn it. That's it. She doesn't know how to do the things that you do know how to do. You guys are different in that way. That's simple, that's clear, that's something they could understand. Now, they may not accept it, okay? So accepting it is different, and how they choose to respond to that is a different story, but at least they can understand it. It helps them be able to put it into context, okay? It helps them be able to plan and understand. All right. They are scared. What do they need because they are scared? So when I talk about scared, I don't mean to imply that every child at this age is walking through life in a state of panic. That's true for some children, but it's certainly not true for all children. But this is a stage of life where they are spending more and more time away from the house than they've ever spent. They are experiencing things they've never experienced before, and they are going to develop new fears, right? And that is developmentally appropriate. They are going to be scared and be exposed to things, and they're going to have questions, and they're going to be worried, and there is a level of expectation of that behavior, right? And that is very different than when children get stuck in anxiety. So anxiety is when that fear, the fear of something or the general fear, is something that now has become maladaptive. So that means that they are now so scared and so worried and so anxious, is what we call it, that they can't kind of go through their day-to-day activities. They can't go to certain places. They can't be around certain groups of people or groups of people in general. They can't really separate from you as their parent. That fear has now built up to a point where it's getting in the way of them being able to just kind of function normally. And that's what we call then anxiety. And so what you see on the screen here, this little picture of this guy, this is a new character from the new Inside Out movie. So Inside Out is a movie that is a fantastic film, and it's a cartoon about the feelings and how feelings play into our actions and kind of control our brains, and the brains of the character of this little preteen girl. And there's an Inside Out 2 that's coming out, and they have added this new character of anxiety. And the reason that they did it is because there's been such an increasing prevalence of anxiety and insecurity in children. So on average, 1 out of 4 children report feeling anxiety. And that's not just I'm scared, that's I'm constantly worried, I'm constantly anxious. It's getting in the way of me being able to do blank. And the average onset of this anxiety is 7 years old. So to put that into context for you, 7 years old is about 2nd grade, right? So we're talking about on average onset of children feeling like they can't function in their day-to-day because they're so worried and they're so scared is average happening in 2nd grade. So that means that there are children that are older. It's happening for some children when they're older, and it's happening for some children that are younger. And so if you feel like you have a child who's already kind of stuck in that anxiety phase, that's a child who is so worried, so nervous that you're feeling like it is impacting their day-to-day functioning, then that is something that is more concerning, and that's something that needs some clinical support, some more professional intervention, okay? Because they've reached a point now where they need help getting unstuck, all right? But if you have a child who's just kind of developing some new fears, some new worries, especially if something new traumatic might have happened to them, or even just because they're just going through life, and hey, life is scary at this stage, then there are things that you can do, that things need from us as adults in order to be able to prepare and not get stuck in that anxiety. Okay. So we're not talking here about children who are feeling really anxious. We're talking about here, you haven't quite gotten stuck, but there's some fears going on, and we want to help support so it hopefully prevents it from getting into that anxiety stage. Okay. And so in that case, what they need is to feel encouraged, and they need to feel reassured. They need to be made to feel safe by you as the adult. And they also need some support building perspective. And perspective is a word that I'm going to talk a bit about more in a second. But here, perspective is this idea of what lens does your child view the world through? And all of us need to build perspective in some way, right? And so are they looking through a lens that is magnified, where that fear is the biggest thing that they can see? Okay, and it's the only thing that they see in front of them. And if that's the case, then the world is going to be big and scary, and it's going to be really hard to move forward, right? But we need to help them support them in building perspective so that they can see that fear is there, it exists. Okay, we're not going to dismiss a fear because it's very real to them, but it's also needs to be balanced. What is the right size of that fear, and what can we do and support you so that you can move forward, right? It doesn't have to be the only thing that you can see. It can be one thing that we consider and plan for and move forward, okay, knowing that it's not the only thing. So something that we can do here is, as adults, to check in. Are we feeding into those insecurities and fears? And are we managing our own insecurities and fears? So an example here, which is actually a real example, is there's a child that was very afraid of using the elevator. They had been on the elevator, it had gotten stuck, and so that child had developed this fear of the elevator. So in terms of perspective, that elevator was now the biggest thing that that child saw, okay? So initially, and as parents, we do this. We want to make things better for our child. We want to make things easier. So the parent's natural instinct was, okay, you're scared of the elevator. Well, we don't have to take the elevator. We'll take the stairs, we'll take the escalator. We just don't have to take the elevator. And that inadvertently is feeding into that fear. It's telling that child, yeah, the elevator is big, bad, and scary. My parent who keeps me safe isn't going to take me on the elevator because the elevator is terrifying. Okay, well, we've inadvertently now fed into this fear, right? We've made that child feel like this fear is actually huge and inescapable, right? Or are we managing our own insecurities and fears, right? Is that, for example, a child who has allergies, all right? And especially if they found out about those allergies from a very scary event where they ate something and now all of a sudden an allergy has developed, okay? That is really scary. It's scary for the child and it's scary for the adult, right? But now, how is the child talking? How is the parent talking about it to the child? Are you constantly talking about the allergy? Are you constantly talking about food? Are you discussing different allergen appointments? Is it now becoming the most pressing thing that has become the thing that your family talks about? How are you managing your own anxieties about that? Because your child is looking to you to be able to learn, is this a fear that I should actually fear? Is this something that is truly as scary as it feels like it is, right? We don't even realize it sometimes, but as adults, we are answering these questions with our actions. We're answering these questions for our child and filling in the gap for them. Is the world scary? And often we are answering, yes, it is scary because look at how my mom and look at how my dad is walking through the world, right? They're learning from watching us. So we need to be in check. Are we managing our own insecurities and our fears? And are we feeding into something without meaning to? And a little point, what's my child's level of exposure? Is that some children, they're very curious and they're always listening. So are they overhearing our conversations? Are they listening to what we're listening to on the radio? Is the news constantly playing on a TV in the house? So they're hearing things without really context or tools to be able to process and make sense of it. So what is my child's level of exposure? What is it that they are being told is true about the world and about their world? And so a little point on something called the content trap. So the content trap is what we can get caught in as adults is when our child is scared. Okay, I want to be able to talk to my child. Maybe my child heard a news story that's really scary and now I want to talk to them about it. But maybe that news story is about something that is very real, something that is very scary, right? And we can't always talk ourselves out of it. We can't always talk in a way where we convince the child that that thing isn't scary. So what is more helpful here is instead of trying to make the thing seem less scary, okay, 'cause sometimes we can't do that, all right, is it's better at this point to talk to our child about how to handle scary feelings, okay? So for me, just a little example, I am a very scared adult of driving on bridges. It's just something that I've always been afraid of. I don't like heights and I specifically don't like bridges. And I have a father who's an engineer and spent part of his life, his professional career, helping to design bridges. He can talk to me all day, every day about why bridges are safe. And that's not going to change the very real feeling I have that those bridges are the most terrifying thing in the world. But instead of letting that fear grow into something that now makes me have to take alternate routes, it stops me from getting places, I need to drive on bridges. Okay, so what is more helpful for me and what is going to be more helpful for your child is if instead of focusing on all the reasons why bridges are super safe, I focus on, well, what are things that I can do when my body feels the very real spike of stress that tells me something feels unsafe? How can I calm my body down? So for me, on driving, I do something called bilateral stimulation. It is something from EMDR, which is a different intervention therapy, but all it's saying is that something that helps calm ourselves down is doing something to both sides of our body at the same time. So you can tap when I'm on my steering wheel, I tap. If you're standing up, you can tap. Okay. Just doing something helps our body calm down. You rock. Okay. I have things that I say to myself. Okay, if you're a family, maybe you're teaching your child a little prayer or a mantra, something that calms them down. All right, breathing is huge, and there's so many fun and silly and playful ways to breathe that kind of tricks your child into breathing and modeling for your child. That's how I calm myself down. Okay, feeling our heart until it calms down. So not getting so caught up in what it is that that child is scared of, but more in when I feel scared, what can I do? How can I regain control in this moment? Because the reality is you can spend all your time successfully convincing your child that that elevator is not scary and that allergy can be avoided, right? And that those bridges are super safe. But they are going to encounter some other thing that is also going to make them scared. And so instead of trying to focus on the content of what scares them each and every time, it is much more helpful and much more accessible for them to learn ways to calm their body down so that when they are in a situation that's scary and they're not with you, they know how to handle it. All right. And that is what they need from us, that encouragement and that reassurance that they are safe and that they can make themselves feel safe. Okay. So, perspective. A few notes on perspective, and this is kind of an intermission, but I really want to talk about it. It's become my new passion topic, and so I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about perspective. So, once more, perspective is this idea that it's the lens with which we see the world. All right. So, children and oftentimes adults, honestly, but we as people really need help building perspective. And this is the idea that I see the world as realistic, as balanced, and I don't see things as skewed. Something is not huge and out of proportion, or really small and dismissive, that I see things as balanced and I can handle and hold those two things. And I want to talk about this because since COVID, this is a huge area of deficit for children in this stage. Specifically, this stage because they spent a lot of their really formative years in relative isolation, right? So, depending on what the pandemic looked like for you and your family, most likely a significant portion of it was spent with them just interacting with immediate family, right? And that meant that children were really exposed to other people, people who thought differently than them, culturally were different, different family makeups, different ideas and opinions. They really didn't have that. So children, and again, some adults, but children in general, have lost the ability to accommodate other people, to be flexible, to share their space and their thoughts with others. And because of that, what we're seeing are children that have a really low tolerance, children that have meltdowns, children that have a lot of like social challenges. So you have a unique ability as an adult in a child's life to help them build perspective. And so there's two areas of perspective that I really want to focus on. And that's perspective with regards to understanding themselves and others. And so these children in their toddler years, toddlers are very, very egocentric. It's me, myself, and I. But when they're in this stage, they're transitioning from that. So they need help building perspective in terms of, I am one of many. So how do I share that? How do I accommodate others? How do I flex? How do I allow other people's opinions to not threaten my own, right? And also perspective on the meaning and impact of failure and success. So this is somewhat of a scale, and you can kind of figure out where your child fits on that scale. But some children see themselves as really incapable of ever doing anything wrong. And so any mistake or any correction or any redirection feels like they cannot handle that. Those are children who melt down if they lose a game, because they don't have perspective to see that it's just a game or it's just a mistake. It's just a wrong answer, right? But then you have other children who if they fail or make a mistake, they internalize that, and it's I'm never going to be good enough. That's when they start to negative self-talk. I'm bad. I'm stupid. I'm not able. Right? They need to build perspective. How can you see that as more balanced? How can you see that as realistic? So two like quick tips and things that you can do easy as a family is one, normalize talking about failure as a family. So and laugh about it. Laughter is such a powerful tool. I use it in therapy all the time because it's so powerful and kind of relieving some of that stress and letting kids know, okay, maybe it's not that big a deal. So maybe you go home and you're saying, oh my gosh, the other day I tripped and I fell in front of all my coworkers and it was so embarrassing and we all laughed. Oh, okay, you made a mistake. You did something embarrassing, but people laughed about it and they moved on. And it didn't make people look at you differently. It didn't make people not want to hang out with you. It's just part of life. Or Oh man, I was doing something in a meeting and I totally forgot one of the slides that I needed and it was such a mistake. So I had to go back and fix it and come back to it later. Okay. Oh, I made a big deal at work. Someone had to correct me maybe. But okay. My mom or my dad, they made that mistake and we move on, we recover. And another thing that we can do is provide opportunities to work with others to fail, to learn, and to recover. So team sports is really good for this. Is that or any opportunity where they can work in a group where children can learn, hey, sometimes you're going to disappoint other people on your team. Sometimes other people on your team are going to disappoint you. It's okay. We work together, right? We make mistakes and we're still a part of that team. Give them opportunities to be around other people and to learn that we can make a mistake, we can learn from that, and then we can recover. That recovery piece is so important in building this concept of perspective. So I just wanted to take a little bit of a commercial break to talk about this because it's so huge. And when this isn't really dealt with, when children aren't able to build this concept of perspective, then it leads to much more serious problems later on. So I just wanted to point that out. Okay. Children are social. So what do they need because they are social? And I don't mean that your child is going to want to be outgoing and extroverted. Some children are and some children are not, right? That is a personality thing, right? The outgoing, the extroversion, the like friendly and funny, that is personality. But what I mean when I say they are social, I mean that at this stage of life, children are around others more than they ever have been before. Okay. They're making real friendships. All right. I am still friends to this day with people that I met when I was in elementary school. All right. They're making friendships that last. And they're also beginning to learn from friends and peers and seek answers to things they're curious about from several sources. So they're going to ask questions of their peers. They're going to ask questions of the internet. They're starting um, to engage in a world outside of just the family unit, which is developmental. We should support that and encourage that. But also something to be aware of is that experimentation with bodies is happening at this stage, okay? They're curious about a lot of things, including what their body is like, what someone else's body is like. And with that comes some more serious concerns, like 1 out of 4 girls and 1 out of 6 boys are reporting instances of sexual abuse. And the median, the middle age for that reporting is 9 years old. So to put that into context, you're talking about third through fourth grade, right? Or something around there. And I share this, and it's a hard thing to talk about, but I share it because a lot of parents think that this conversation is a middle school, high school conversation. Parents think elementary school is way too young to talk about it. And, I wish that were true. But the reality is, kids are being curious. They're asking, they're exploring. The internet exists, okay? They have access to it. And the kids are having these conversations, even if we are not. And as someone who works primarily with this age group, what I can say to you is that they are asking questions. And they are asking questions that when we were young, were not even on our radar. And so if you think that it can wait, it most likely cannot, right? So what do they need from us? They need to have a safe and trusted source to get information and learn about the world, including their bodies. So do not wait. Start these conversations. Sit them down. I have had these conversations with children as young as 3, right? Now, the way you have these conversations is going to depend on developmentally kind of where your child is. But generally speaking, if you create an environment where you can be your child's primary source of information, have them be able to know that they can come to you, that they can get honest and real information. Be honest and use clear language. Don't lie to your children. I know some parents kind of lie or dismiss or fluff over information, but again, you are one of a lot of sources. So if what you say is drastically different than what a teacher might have said, what a peer might have said, what their I don't know, what the internet told them, then all of a sudden you're going to start to look like you're not really that trustworthy. So tell them what's true. Be credible. Tell them honestly and use real language. So this is something that makes some parents really uncomfortable, especially parents from different cultures. I know culturally growing up, this was not always the case, but I really appreciated that my parents did. They used very real language. And all of the research now suggests use real medical language. Tell them, You have a penis. Your sister has a vagina. Use those words because it makes it then easier for them to use the right language when they're trying to tell you if something happened or they're trying to tell another adult if something happened, right? If you have the words that you use as a family, well, if they're trying to tell an adult at school something that happened that they're concerned about, they're not going to be able to communicate that. So use real, honest language and let them know you have a penis and no one should look at your penis and no one should touch your penis unless it's mommy and daddy helping you get ready at home or a doctor if you're feeling sick. Set those boundaries so then they know if something happens at school where someone asks them a question or tries to do something, or they're out at camp and something happens and they feel a little bit unsure about it, they know, oh, no one is supposed to do this. That is a line that no one can cross. It helps them know what is and isn't okay and sets that safety for them. Okay. And if they ask a question and you don't know the answer or you just don't know how to talk about it, tell them, you know what, I think I need to come back to you on that. Go figure it out, ask for help, and then come back and follow up on that. Don't forget to follow up because they're not going to forget. So it's totally okay to be like, actually, I'm not really sure. Let me come back to you and come back to finish that conversation later. Okay. All right. They are being asked to do new and hard things. These children are being asked to sit in school for 8 hours a day. They're being asked to pay attention. They're being asked to regulate themselves. They're being asked to engage with a bunch of new people. They are maybe have new responsibilities at home, new chores. They are sometimes asked to be new big siblings, to have responsibility for their younger siblings. They are being asked to do a lot. And if you can just try for a minute to remember what that was like and how overwhelming that can feel for a child. So, what they need from us is to be an attuned parent and they need a break. So, an attuned parent is a parent that checks in, that can realize, oh, okay, my kid may need a little bit of this, my kid may need a little bit of that, right? Allow for time to rest and decompress. If you have a very introspective child, that whole day of school with that many people that they have to talk to, they sometimes just want to come home and take a break and kind of just zone out, read a book, maybe, play by themselves. That might be what they need. If you have a really active child and they've been asked to sit all day and take tests and do work, then maybe they just need some time to play and move around. Allow for that, right? So some parents will say like, oh, my child keeps having tantrums after school. Well, think about it. How much are you expecting of them? Are you constantly asking them to tell you about their day? Are they coming home? They have to do a million different things. You're running from one place to another. You're going to get groceries right after the school day. Are you naturally building a schedule for them that is allowing for breaks, or are you asking them to go from one to another and now they're exhausted and now they've reached their limit, right? So think about how and when you're asking them questions and how and when you're asking them to do some things, and consider their schedule and your family schedule. Sometimes for some families, there's too many extracurriculars and they just need a little limit. Maybe they don't need to do ballet and swimming and soccer. Okay, maybe you choose one, or maybe you take a season where you're not doing anything because your child just needs that, right? And your family needs that. They need boundaries and they need limits. These children are being asked to regulate, and self-regulation is hard. And the only way that we build the ability to self-regulate is by being given opportunities to do that, right? Children are not adults and they need us to teach them what boundaries are. They need us to teach them what their limits are. And if we enforce those limits at home, it allows children to learn how to self-regulate in other environments in the future, right? So often, children who have an inability to self-regulate, and actually, let me make a point. When I'm talking about this, there are going to be some children who are going to be diagnosed with ADD or ADHD, or they're otherwise neurodivergent, or they have some real sensory needs. So if that is the case, that's something different. That is dealt with in a little bit of a different way, and that needs some more clinical intervention and support. Because this is going to be extremely challenging for those children, right? So here we're talking about children who don't fall into that category. These are things that we can help and enforce at home. For children who have self-regulation challenges, right? The children that really can't control their bodies very well, or they're learning how to manage a frustration, like building, enforcing those limits helps them be able to say, okay, I'm learning, I'm practicing. Children at this age are like rushing water. I say they're like a flood of water. All right. And those limits and those boundaries is like the dam that they come up against. All right. And they might fight it and they don't want those limits, right? But if we hold tight and we enforce it, eventually they learn how to calm. Okay. So parents, it gets harder before it gets easier, but it is so worth it. It's one of the most important things we can do for our children is to enforce those limits and set those boundaries. It helps them understand how to keep other people safe, how to keep the family safe, okay, and healthy and moving. And it also helps them understand how to keep themselves safe and healthy and moving. Okay. And I put screen time and devices up there, and just very briefly for the sake of time, I will say, I don't have a general opinion on screen time and devices. Everything is going to be different for each family, and some parents are going to really just need that break after school to be 30 minutes of you just watch a TV show while I get myself together, okay? And that's what you need as your family, that's what you need as your family, okay? Some parents are going to allow for, okay, you get to play on your tablet before bed, you've earned it. Okay, that's what works for your family. So I don't generally have a rule on that. What I will say is something that is really important is before any screen time or any device is introduced, to be very clear with your child of what the expectations are with that device. So again, they're really concrete thinkers, okay? So don't just give them a tablet and say, okay, be responsible. What does that look like? All right, is you can use your tablet for certain times, maybe 30 minutes before bed or 30 minutes right after school, and maybe an hour on the weekend, whatever it is for your family. Be very clear about that. Let them know is that mommy or daddy are going to be able, you're going to choose a password that they also have. We're going to be able to check and know what you're doing at any time, right? Let them know. They need to be responsible. They know they're going to be held accountable. That changes when they're teenagers. Okay, there's a bit more of a privacy element to that when they're teenagers, but at this stage, they need to learn what is safe, what is responsible. How do you use this in a way that is respectful and in a way that is safe for everybody? So just making it very clear what the expectations, what the boundaries and the limits are is really important. And that's really the only general thing that I say about screen time. Otherwise, you get to choose as a family because some children are going to be able to handle 30 minutes and some children really like they're just overly stimulated and screen time is not going to help the problem. Okay. Um, yeah, so a little bit more thoughts on screen time and devices, but we can get to that later. And the last thing is children are aware, and this has come up kind of throughout, but at this stage, children are curious and they're constantly watching you as an example while they learn to navigate the world. Your actions are the answers to their questions. Okay, so how you navigate the world is teaching your child how they should navigate the world. So what they need from us as the adults in their lives is to do our own work, right? So often parents come and the problem is their child. And as we talk about it, it's, hey, you have some stuff that's unresolved. You have some stuff that you're carrying, and it is teaching something to your child that you don't want them to learn, but they're learning it by just the way that you are acting. So if you are a parent who yells when you're frustrated and angry, then you are teaching your child that anger and frustration and those negative feelings are dealt with through anger. They're learning that from you. Okay. If you are a parent who is anxious and worried and constantly unsure, you're teaching your child that the world is scary and that it's never fully safe. Right. And so I love this picture because in this first image, it's someone carrying something, and we are often carrying things that we maybe aren't always aware of. Juana talked about this when we had the part one talk is we often either parent in the way that we were parented, right? We carry on those maladaptive parenting habits, we carry those, or we do the opposite, where we try to parent completely different than how we were parented because we don't like how we were parented. Either way, in both of those scenarios, we're carrying something. We're carrying some traumas, we're carrying something, right? Those burdens. And what we do as parents, if we don't deal with it, is we hand over to our child this heavy burden, this heavy load, right? Versus if we check in, we're aware of it, we try to work through some of that stuff, that burden gets a little bit lighter. That burden gets a little bit lighter. And so much of what we think is my child's problem is stuff that we really need to work through and realize, hey, are there patterns in how I'm treating my child that are inadvertently teaching them something about the world or about themselves, right? And for For mothers and daughters, this is huge. How am I talking about myself and my body in front of my child? What might that also be teaching my child? So just a little important note, because they're paying attention and they're learning and they're making their conclusions, and we want to help them come to conclusions that are the healthiest for them. And so as we come to a close, something that I wanted to put up here is this is from our Instagram account. We posted this a while back, and I think it's really helpful just to remember that not every day is going to feel like a successful parenting day. And some days you're going to say things that you wish you hadn't and do things you wish you'd done differently, and allow yourself to make those mistakes. Speaking about perspective, right? If we have a bad day and we make a mistake, it's okay. We carry that in balance, right? In balance. Is that sometimes I'm gonna make a mistake, and learning, maybe we come back and we try again the next day, or I apologize to my child. Apologizing to children is so important, and not enough adults do it. Hey, I'm really sorry I lost my temper at you yesterday, but I'd like to talk about what happened, right? Coming back, trying again, okay? No one was born knowing how to be a parent. No one is born knowing how to do this. We are learning it every single day through experiences, through mistakes, and every day is a chance to try, to learn, to reset, and to try again. Okay, so just wanted to put this out there, because if you are a parent who is here or watching this, then you are a parent who is trying, and you're trying your best. And that's what our kids need from us, is to constantly just be trying to do the best that we can. And so our actual closing thought, everything that we shared is hopefully helpful advice and things that you can implement and work and put in place to help support your child. But what we are going to see sometimes is sometimes a child is just not going to respond to these things. So maybe that's a child who is neurodivergent in some way. Maybe it's a child who is just having a little bit more challenges that are more than you as a parent feel like you can handle. So up on the screen are some things that are usually red flags of something is going on, something needs a little bit more intervention. So these are usually things that will tell you, hey, it's time to seek help. But also you don't have to wait until you see this. If some parents will come to us and it's just, hey, there's just something that is just causing a burden on our household. And we just need a little bit of extra help, a little bit of extra advice, right? So those calls from the school are usually a trigger, but it can also be, hey, we're just having some difficulty and we just need a little bit of extra help. And maybe that's extra help working with the child. Maybe it's working as a family. Maybe it's working with you as a parent. And so that is what we are here for. Again, we're here, we do this work. We love to do this work and work with children specifically at this age. So if you found that as we were talking, maybe you felt like, oh, my child kind of fits in a different spot, I think I might need a little bit of extra help, please feel free to reach out. You can find out all of our information right there on that website, nextlevelupcounseling.com. You can reach out to us there, schedule an appointment. If you're just still unsure, we do a 15-minute consultation that is free. So you can just kind of call, chat with one of us, and we can kind of help you navigate. Is this normal? Or is maybe something else going on? Okay, so we are going to stop the recording and then open it up for questions. Oh, and just one more reminder is that next Saturday we have our part 3 of our series, which is on adolescence, which is a whole other ball game. So that'll be led by Leticia. So, feel free to join us if you are at that stage or not yet and just in preparation. That's sure to be a great one as well. Okay, so I am going to stop recording